Now, there's one thing I know that all of us adults can agree on. We've all contemplated on what's going to happen when we die. We've all thought about, how's that going to work? How's it going to do? And by the way, that contemplation is universal. It goes around the world. And all the major religions in the world spend a lot of time trying to figure that out and predict what's going to happen for their congregations. And even pagan societies and cultures, they think about what is going to happen when we leave this life. Now, in the Christian world, we learn that for believers in Jesus Christ, we're going to be given an everlasting life forever in a place called heaven. Now, that's what we've been promised. But what is it exactly? Where are we going? Well, we know in the lead scripture this morning, in John 14, the 2 and 3 verses there, that Jesus tells his disciples that heaven, he is going to heaven to prepare a place for them. So now we know one thing. Heaven is a place, has a place. And he said he's going to come back and get them, and take them back to him. So we know there's travel involved here. So, but what else do we know? Well, scriptures in the Bible are very thin about what heaven is. The scriptures, even the Old Testament and New Testament, said there is a heaven up there, but they don't tell us what to expect. So how can we get some clues about where we're going? There's travel, and what's going to happen when we get there? Well, there we do have another source that we can go to. And I just want to show you this. These are some of the books that are out there on people who have died, experienced heaven, encountered it, and were so moved that they wrote books about it. What I want to do this morning is to help us capture an idea of what may be ahead for us when we finally check out of here. So what I want to do is share 3 of these testimonies with you this morning. And I want to begin with this book. It's called Flight to Heaven with Captain Dale Black. Some of you may have read it. But in order to do that, I've got to go behind here. And I want to share with you 3 testimonies from those books. And the first one's from Captain Dale Black. Now, Captain Dale Black is an accomplished pilot, and he's dedicated his life for flying all over the world for charity. And he flies on dust strips, and he goes everywhere the charity wants him to go. And he does this because of what happened to him when he was 19 years old. Now, all of his life, he wanted to be a pilot. That's all he wanted to do. He lived in Los Alamitos, California. And one day, he was on a training flight with 2 senior pilots. He was sitting in the back seat. The 2 senior pilots were in the front seat, and this was a Piper Navajo twin prop engine plane, aircraft. So they take off, and no more than about a mile away from the end of the runway, one of the engines fails. And it fails so completely that the senior pilots couldn't control it and get it back on the other engine, and it plummeted into this 2.5-story solid concrete monument that was in a public park. And the plane shattered. The 2 senior pilots lost their life. Captain Black, he was at 19 now, Dale Black, his body was all over the concrete, down on the pavement, and everything was broken in his body. He had a cracked skull. He just barely hung on to life until I got him to the emergency room. And then I'm going to let Captain Black tell you what happened. I'm going to quote this. My last memories were when I had been in the hospital, seeing myself in the operating room from a vantage point near the ceiling. I remember feeling lighter and lighter, being drawn down the hallway, swept out the door of the hospital, and suddenly I was gone. I was still traveling at enormous speed, all the while feeling no sensation of movement. At this time, I became aware that I was not traveling alone. Accompanying me were 2 angelic escorts dressed in seamless white garments woven with silver threads. They had no discernible gender, but appeared masculine and larger than I was. I could see their emotions, clearly delighted to be ushering me through this wonderland. I was fast approaching a magnificent city, golden and gleaming with a myriad of resplendent colors. The light I saw was the purest I have ever seen, and the music was the most majestic, enchanting, and glorious I have ever heard. The city was bathed in light, an opaque whiteness, in which the light was intense but diffused. In that dazzling light, every color imaginable seemed to exist. The colors seemed to be alive, dancing in the air. I had never seen so many different colors. The magnificent light I was experiencing emanated from about 40 to 50 miles from within the city walls. Remarkably, the light didn't shine on things, but through them, through the grass, through the trees, through the wall. There was a huge gathering of angels and people, millions, countless millions. They were gathered in a central area that seemed over 10 miles in diameter. Waves of people moving in the light, swaying to the music, worshiping God. Holiness hovered over them the way I imagine the Spirit of God brooding over the surface of the deep at the beginning of time. Somehow, the music in heaven calibrated everything, and I felt that nothing was rushed. Time was clearly evident, but it too was perfect. The music was in perfect timing. The songs and hymns had a beginning and an end, yet in heaven I was certain that time was stable, nothing dying, nothing decaying, nothing hurried, nothing late. The music was a seamless blend of vocals and instrumentals. Neither diminished the other, but rather enriched the other. I thought I would burst with exuberance as I found myself included in such sacred and joyous melodies. I knew instantly that this place was entirely and utterly holy. I was overwhelmed by its beauty, and the strong sense of belonging filled my heart. I never wanted to leave. Never had I felt so right anywhere. For the first time in my life, I was completely whole. My attention was diverted to the beautiful entrance. I was certain I was going through the gate. I felt so special, you can't believe how special. After all of this was for me. Everyone was there for me. Because of the highly expectant look on their smiling faces, it seemed as if they knew I would be given a gift and what that gift would do for me. And then, as I was about to travel through the entrance and receive the gift, I was swept away. So that's the story of Dale Black. Now, the next testimony I want to share with you comes from Dr. Mary Neal. She's an orthopedic surgeon and an avid kayak enthusiast. And she lost her life. She drowned in the Los Rios region of southern Chile with her husband and some friends. They were shooting whitewater, and they went over the cliff. She was the fourth one over. And the other three went over into the pool below and then came out and went around the river. She went down, her boat got caught under a rock ledge and flipped over. And she was caught in there. She couldn't get out of that boat. And she died before they recognized she was gone and found where she was and get her out of there. She was already gone. And I want to share some of the excerpts from her book, To Heaven and Back. And I quote, "While my body was slowly being sucked out of the boat, I felt as though my soul was slowly peeling away from my body. It felt as if I had finally shaken off my heavy outer layer, freeing my soul. I rose up and out of the river, and when my soul broke through the surface of the water, I encountered a group of 15 to 20 souls, human spirits sent by God, who greeted me with the most overwhelming joy I've ever experienced and could ever imagine. I was part of them, and I knew that they were sent to guide me across the divide of time and dimension that separates our world from God's. Their brilliance was both blinding and invigorating. We simultaneously communicated our thoughts and emotions and understood each other perfectly, even though we did not use language. Now, I understand entirely how this could be. God doesn't need verbal language for communication. My arrival was joyously celebrated, and a feeling of absolute love was palpable as these spiritual beings and I hugged, danced, and greeted each other. My companions and I began to glide along a path, and I knew that I was going home, my eternal home. We were traveling down a path that led to a great, brilliant hall, larger and more beautiful than anything I could conceive of seeing on earth. It was radiating a brilliance of all colors and beauty. I felt my soul being pulled toward the entry, and as I approached, I physically absorbed its radiance and felt the pure, complete, and utterly unconditional, absolute love that emanated from the hall. It was the most beautiful and alluring thing I had ever seen or experienced. I felt ready to enter the hall and was filled with an intense longing to be reunited with God. We arrived at the entry hall, and I could see the spirits bustling about inside. Before we could go inside, however, an oppressive feeling of grief and sadness descended on my spiritual companions, and the atmosphere became heavy. They turned to me and explained that it was not my time to enter the hall. I had not completed my journey on earth, had more work to do, and must return to my body. We shared our sorrow as they returned me to the riverbank. So that's the story, that's the testimony of Mary Neal, Dr. Mary Neal. The last testimony is by Don Piper, and his book was called 90 Minutes in Heaven. And I quote, he had been an ordained pastor for 4 years. And one afternoon, leaving church and going back home on a rainy afternoon, he drove across the bridge that took him to the other side where he lived. And when he was on that bridge, and it was an old bridge with a lot of steel superstructure on it, and it's very narrow, and a big semi came by, sideswiped him, and mangled his car. And he couldn't get out, and the EMTs, when they arrived, pronounced him dead. And his story goes like this. When I died, I didn't flow through a long, dark tunnel. I had no sense of fading away or coming back. I never felt my body being transported into the light. A light did develop me with brilliance on anything on earth I could comprehend or describe. Only that. In my next moment of awareness, I was standing in heaven. Joy pulsated through me as I looked around, and at that moment I became aware of a large crowd of people. They stood in front of a brilliant, ornate gate. As the crowd rushed forward toward me, I didn't see Jesus, but I did see people I have known. All were full of life and expressed radiant joy. Age expresses time passing, and there is no time there. All the people I encountered were the same age I had seen them the last time they had been on earth, except all the ravages of living on earth had vanished. Heaven was many things, but without a doubt, it was the greatest family reunion of all. Heaven's light and texture defy earthly eyes or explanation. Warm, radiant light engulfed me. As I looked around, I could hardly grasp the vivid, dazzling colors. Every hue and tone surpassed anything I had ever seen. Then I heard the music. My most vivid memory of heaven is what I heard. I can only describe it as a holy swoosh of wings. It was the most beautiful and pleasant sound I've ever heard, and it didn't stop. The swooshing resounded as if it was a form of never-ending praise. The melodies of praise filled the atmosphere. None of the songs were about Jesus' sacrifice or death. I heard no sad songs, and instinctively knew that there are no sad songs in heaven. The praise was unending, but the most remarkable thing to me was that hundreds of songs were being sung at the same time, all of them worshiping God. Every sound blended, and every voice or instrument enhanced the others. I wasn't conscious of anything I had left behind, and felt no regrets about leaving family or possessions. I was home. I was where I belonged. I wanted to be there more than I wanted to ever be anywhere on earth. I had no needs. I felt perfect. Instead of just hearing the music and the thousands of voices praising God, I had become part of the choir. Then, just as suddenly as I arrived at the gate of heaven, I left them. Now, these three testaments all differ. They're different in what happened to them. But there was a lot of things that happened to them that we can say are the same. The brilliant light, the array of colors, it was so brilliant and dazzling, they had never seen that. The music, the gate, and the glow, and the love of the people who came to greet them as they came out and greet them, all in a different kind of way, but in the same way. So, what are we to think about this? Well, we could say that God, we know, on earth, here, has created us as unique individuals. There's no cloning in God's creation. Everything's unique. And what we do in our life here in the natural domain is we respond individually to whatever comes our way. None of us do it the same, and yet we experience a lot of the same things. Night, day, rain, wind, all the rest of the things. But we do it uniquely. So why wouldn't we think that that would be available to us in heaven the same way? Now there's one thing I want to, as I close, there's one thing that wasn't mentioned yet, but was captured by Dale Black better than I could possibly do it. I just want to finish by quoting what he said about heaven and the foundation of heaven. Part of the joy I was experiencing was not only the presence of everything wonderful, but the absence of everything terrible. There was no strife, no competition, no sarcasm, no betrayal, no deception, no lies, no murders, no unfaithfulness, no disloyalty, nothing contrary to light and life and love. In short, there was no sin. And the absence of sin was something you could feel. There was no shame because there was nothing to be ashamed of. There was no sadness because there was nothing to be sad about. Here was perfection, complete and utter perfection. The revelation of sin's absence was astounding and exhilarating. This is where I belong. I was made to be in heaven, in a perfect place where there is no sin. I had been in heaven for some time before I recognized sin's absence. Now I contemplated the one thing that dominated everything on earth, that infected everything on earth, but was missing here. I was so accustomed to sin that I haven't recognized its far-reaching effect in every part of life. But nothing had been tainted in heaven by sin's destructive touch. This perfection I experienced was largely due to the absence of sin. Now, think about it for a minute. A complete absence of sin. I don't think we're capable of doing that. I don't think we could fathom what an environment, a sin-free environment would be like. Because from the first breath we take to the last one we take, we're smothered in sin. That's the only thing we know. And we ricochet through life in an environment of sin. So how would we have any idea about how wonderful it would be where there's a place where there's no sin? And if there's no sin, then all this resplendent things that these testimonies had witnessed to is possible. And the only way we can do that is die ourselves and meet up together in heaven. That's how we're going to figure this out. But when you think about it, heaven is in fact worth living for. It is worth waiting for. It is worth wanting for. Thanks be to God. Amen.